Hi, my name is Dr. David Campt. I'm with the Dialogue Company and the Voice Project. Voice stands for Voters Organized to Influence Critical Elections. This is the 7th and final installment of our series focused on bridging divides. And I'm so grateful that you're attending. And I want to have my partner introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Karin Tamerius. I'm the founder of Smart Politics. I'm an expert in political psychology and psychiatry, and I teach people how to have more productive and persuasive conversations about politics.
All right. Thank you, Karin. And so, and again, I'm David Campt, head of Dialogue Company, and I do a lot of thinking and teaching about how to have compassion-based conversations that influence people, whether it's about politics or not. Our focus in this series has been about politics and about the election, and we first did the first 3 on influencing people who might not who might not vote, and then the second 4 of these has been coming today on influencing people to vote differently. So thank you so much. Here's what we're going to do today in our jam-packed half hour. We're going to talk about what can you achieve through trying to talk to people. People think that everybody's mind's made up, and I don't think so. Karin can say a little bit about that. We're going to talk about harmonizing, that we're going to teach you the REACH method, which we teach for persuasion in general, and about this. So the last step is harmonize. What does that mean? What is harmonizing? What are the goals of harmonizing? What is the art of doing that? And then we're going to do a role play and then a final review of all of what we've done. So that's our agenda for today. So I want to kick it to Karin next and to tell us about what we can achieve.
Great. Thank you, David. One of the biggest questions I get when I'm talking with people across the political spectrum is, what is the point of talking with people who have absolutely made up their minds, who are vehemently opposed to you, who have a different perception of reality in some cases, who are absolutely certain that they're right, and who even seem to be sometimes operating from a completely different set of values? Well, my answer to that question is twofold. The first thing is that you can practice dissuasion when you are talking with someone whose mind is made up. And basically what this means is you're reaching out to someone who is diametrically opposed to you on the issues, or diametrically opposed to you in terms of who they're voting for in an election. And you know you're probably not going to be able to persuade them. Persuasion is something that usually happens with people who are undecided, or who have only recently settled upon their position. You can change someone who is absolutely decided through persuasion over time, but usually it's in a short period of time. What you're focused on is dissuasion. So what does dissuasion mean? Dissuasion is fundamentally about increasing doubt. You're trying to get somebody to be open to the possibility that they might be wrong, not about their global assessment so much, but about some things, so that they start to think a little bit more critically. And we're going to give you some tools today to help you do that. The second thing you can do is you can engage in demobilization. So one of the challenges we have in our current political climate is that it's highly polarized. People on the right and the left are very angry at one another and dislike each other immensely. And most of their behavior is actually being driven by their dislike of one another rather than their like and support of their own side. So one of the best things that we can do, both to heal the nation and to begin the process of getting people to open up to different ideas, is to get at the underlying emotions that are mobilizing them in politics. So get them so they aren't so hostile toward people on the other end of the political spectrum. Help them calm down so they're not constantly triggered. Get them to a place where they're not feeling so fearful or disgusted by the other side. So again, we're going to provide you with some tools for how to do that. And David, why don't you go ahead and tell us how to harmonize?
I'll be happy to do that, but let me just say, the biggest tool to help people calm down is not being a jerk yourself. Like, they're part of what goes on is people are all like agitated and they look at the other person as an enemy and they act like that. The other person feels that too. So yes, there are tools we can talk about, but the biggest tool is to come from a stance of compassion and empathy and curiosity, as opposed to kind of a disgust and disdain, derision, and so that's an important shift. So
be the change, as they say.
There you go. Be the change. Exactly. So so one of the things that we go over every time is important to recognize a tool for persuading people, whether it's about politics or something else, is something we call the REACH method. I will go over it briefly. REACH stands for reflect, inquire, agree, confess, and harmonize. And I'll say a little bit about each. We've covered each of these steps in the past weeks, and you can go back and look at those tapes to drill down on each one. Like today, we're going to drill down on harmonize, but I'm going to review all of them. Reflect means calm down. Calm yourself, fill yourself up with compassion for the other person. We've talked about that in more length, but it means center yourself, essentially. Inquire, ask questions. You want to be in a stance of asking questions. Agree. You want to be, you want to convey to the other person that you don't think they're crazy. You acknowledge their views and accept that they're, at least that they are their views, and that there's something in them. It's not completely ridiculous. Confess goes even further, where you try to tell a story that embodies the fact that you don't think they're completely ridiculous. And then harmonize is where you try to, that's where you really try to influence them, where you try to tell them a different story that conveys your point of view. And then you try to help them see that your points of view are not completely incompatible, and there might be some advantages into adapting your view, but you're not trying to get them to obliterate their point of view. All right, harmonize. This is the last step, and this is where you gently invite the other person to your position with a story. One of the things that we talked about originally, and you go back and look at the other episodes, is that people are more influenced by stories than they are about facts. So when you're trying to influence somebody, what you want to do is to use a story that explains, essentially, that embodies why you believe like you believe. And the good thing about stories is if you tell it well and people identify with you, their mind will automatically try to imagine themselves in your position. And so you're sort of bringing them along with you and inviting them to see maybe there's a different way of looking at that. So that's the core of the harmonize step. And then you try to help them see that the thing that you have agreed with and what you're trying to get them to don't have to be completely incompatible. So that is your goal in harmonizing. So Karin, tell them why harmonizing works.
Oh, I thought you were going to do that, David, but I can go.
Well, I will do it. Let me tell you why harmonizing works. So basically, the one of the reasons that harmonizing works is because you're trying to get around their defenses, like it circumvents their defenses. Like a part of what happens is that people often think like only one thing is true, and people who believe opposite are wholly different people. And what you're trying to do with the harmonize step is to convey through a story that hopefully they can identify with that, well, there are, you don't have to be as defensive about that. You don't have to assume that only crazy people think a different way. Now remember, you do the harmonize step after you've done the other steps where you show them that you have some agreement with their belief. You confess that there's been moments or there have been circumstances in which you believe something very similar to them, or you can understand their perspective. You shared that. So then when you go to the harmonize step, you're further making the point that it's not just those crazy people who believe something different than what they do. Facilitates perspective taking. Part of what is important that's useful to do in any kind of conversation is to get people to look at things from different angles. So by telling a story, where again, you tell a story hopefully somewhat compelling, where they identify with you, they go, I hadn't looked at it from that way. And that's what you're trying to get to. You're not trying to change it completely in one conversation. What you're trying to do is to, as Karin said, you're trying to enhance doubt, and that facilitate perspective taking is an important thing on that. And then finally, you're trying to model change. By going from the confess and agree and confess step to the harmonize, you're showing you have the capacity to look at things from different points of view, and you're modeling that, and you're inviting them to do the same. And hopefully you can do so in a way that gets them to go, huh, I hadn't thought about it like that. And if you get that, you're already, that's the gold standard. You rarely convert people completely, but just getting them to think, huh, that's interesting, then you know you're working.
Great. Thank you, David. So I'm going to talk a little bit about harmonizing goals. In previous episodes, we've talked about the importance of, in general, in conversations, setting goals for what makes a conversation successful so that you don't set them too high. In these conversations, as I already said, you're probably not going to be able to persuade people. So if you're not thinking about persuasion, what kind of outcome goal might you hope for, and what do you want to strategize around? So the first goal that you want to consider is busting stereotypes. When I have conversations with conservatives, because I'm a liberal, one of the first things I try to accomplish is not to persuade them, but just to convince them that I am not their stereotype of a crazy liberal. And one of the things that really has a huge impact on them is when we have a conversation, and it's a measured conversation and a compassionate conversation, and then I reveal that I am a liberal from Berkeley, California, and it dramatically shifts the way they think about what a liberal from Berkeley, California is like. And it starts to open up the possibility that, oh, maybe those people who I don't like aren't really as bad as I've been led to believe. And that can be really powerful in shifting the conversation long term. The second thing I try to do in a conversation is to reframe the issue that we're talking about. All policies or politicians or political issues that we discuss can be thought of through a variety of lenses. And usually when we're stuck in a political position, it's tied to the fact that we're thinking about it through one particular lens or one particular frame. By inviting people to shift their frame or offering a new frame, you can kind of change the way they are thinking about the issue. And even if you don't persuade them, it can get them to realize, like, oh, there is a different way of seeing this. I think a great example of that is on the issue of COVID, for example, where people often think in terms of their own personal safety and the risks involved when they choose to go out and not use a mask. But when you reframe the issue in terms of potentially risks to others, that can be a different way of thinking about behavior. So what kind of freedom are we talking about? Freedom to do something, or freedom from something? And anyway, I try to reframe issues. The third thing that I try to do in these conversations is to convey information that they might not otherwise have access to. Now, it's important to keep in mind that when I convey information, I'm not doing it in a didactic or lecturing way. I don't give a lecture on why they're wrong or list off data points that they should be considering in making their decisions. As we know from prior discussions, that's not how the brain works. The way the brain works is the brain is a story processor, not a logic processor or a data processor. So if you want to convey information, the way to do that is in the context of a story. That way people are less defensive about it, able to take it in, but also they remember it better when it's enmeshed within a narrative. So those are really the big three things I try to accomplish in my Harmonize efforts.
Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about different ways that shows up. These are not all the ways, but these are some big picture category ways. So remember, you're telling a story, right? You've agreed with them. You've told a story that is aligned with them, now telling a different story. So one type of story is basically, I used to be like you, right? And then something happened. So a lot in my work on race relations, a lot of times this has been helpful for white folks who think that racism is real, talking to white folks who don't, where you go, in the confession, you might say, I understand how you feel. I felt like that. And then, so let that exist between you, and then say, I felt like that, and then something happened that made me feel differently. So it's as we said earlier, you're modeling change. So you're not obliterating the other point of view because you're expressing empathy for that previous state, but you say, and then you're explaining what happened that made me go to a different point of view. Another type of story is more focused on values. And Karin just illustrated that, which is talking about the masks, right? So on the one hand, yes, the masks are inconvenient and they're a headache and they make your glasses steam up and all the stuff that they do. But sometimes a story about how a different story that shows, well, this happened and I feel differently about this issue when I think about this, because you're highlighting a different set of values. Because oftentimes we're all dealing with different values on different in different parts of our lives, even the same situation. And so sometimes a story highlights a different set of values that you're inviting them to also consider as also a legitimate set of values. And then lastly, there was another time, there was like a case situation. And this can be good when you think that your policy preferences cut in different directions, and you acknowledge, this is often helpful when in your confess step, you acknowledge that there's some truth to their perspective, but you think that the more general thing is something different, and so you acknowledge that as almost like an exceptional case. I agree with that happened, but let me tell you, there was another time when this other truth was at issue. So you're inviting them to look at this other truth that they're not that they are not prone to looking at, and that's how you're trying to influence them to help them see that sometimes something else is true, and then maybe from there you go to, well, maybe that's true a lot of times, and but the nature of the story is you're trying to get them to see how some situation had an alternate truth than the one that you've already acknowledged. Okay, and we're going to use, it's going to be that one that we're going to use in the role play that we're about to do. And I think it's time to go to that. So in the role play we're about to do, we're going to have a conversation about gun control. And although Karin is a stark raving liberal in real life, in this role play, she's going to play a gun rights person, and I'm going to play the role of somebody who is more for gun control. So we're going to do a little bit about we're going to talk a little about the election. The election is a frame, but we're going to get right to the gun control issue. Okay?
Just to clarify, David, so I'm playing a conservative.
You're playing a conservative. You're playing a conservative, and one of the main reasons that you are a conservative is because you are worried about the gun control.
Okay.
You're worried about the one of the candidates being more about gun control, and then you not liking it. So then we're going to have a conversation about that.
Right. Okay. All right. Go for it.
Okay. Hey, Karin, how you doing?
I'm doing okay, David. Thank you. How are you?
I'm all right. So I was wondering, the election's coming, so I was really curious about how you were feeling about it, and what were the issues on your mind about the election?
Oh, well, you know me, David. There's no way I am voting for Joe Biden. It's
Mm-hmm.
He is he's gonna take away our guns. He's demonstrated time and time again that he doesn't respect the Constitution, and that is a no-go zone for me. Like, that is a deal breaker.
I see. So let's talk about the Constitution thing. I mean, I don't know about that. I want to talk about the gun thing for a second. So sounds like you're a pretty strong gun rights person.
You bet I am.
Why is that?
Yeah, lifelong member of the NRA. This is the major issue for me. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
David, you know me. I have spent my whole life with guns, around guns.
Uh-huh.
It's
funny. I was asking you why it's so important to you. So that is really, tell me more about that.
This is one of some of my favorite childhood memories are going out with my dad, going shooting, and these liberals want to treat people like freaking children, and tell us that we aren't mature enough to handle guns. Well, I can tell you that my whole life I was, from the time I was a little kid, my dad taught me how to handle a gun. I can lock and load and clean a gun and do whatever in my sleep.
Yeah. I
follow every safety regulation out there, and I'll be damned if some liberal is going to come and tell me whether or not I can have a gun, right? So
let me make sure I got it straight. So you're saying that the whole idea that sometimes people say that guns are not safe is like, that's just not your experience at all, right?
Not at all.
Yeah.
This is made up so that they can take away our rights.
I got you. So it's funny. I haven't been around guns that much, but I think my dad owned a gun. We never talked about it, but I had growing up, I tended to be kind of anti-gun, and let me tell you what happened. So one time I was outside. This was back in the late 80s, early 90s, the crazy 80s, when you go to clubs and you're a young person, and sometimes it can get a little rowdy because everybody wants to get in the club. And I remember one time, like I was outside this club, and it seemed like there was just a certain amount of tension that was happening in the crowd. And a couple of people getting loud here and there, and I was like, "Oh, what is this going?" Because people are frustrated because they're not getting in the club. And then like this dude showed up, like he was on a balcony in a business next door to the club, and he clearly had a gun on him, and it was like everything calmed down. Like I was like, wow, look at that. Like this dude shows up, and he doesn't say anything, he doesn't wave his gun, but he clearly has a gun. Yeah. And it was the temperature went down. Like it was really kind of interesting. And I had never experienced. I'm sorry, what?
Like knowing that someone might have a gun is a huge deterrent for crime and violence. Like that is a way to maintain order in society. And Democrats,
I had never experienced that before. So I thought that was really like I've never forgotten that. So that's wow. That's really true. So let me tell you something else that happened a few years after that. So I had my girlfriend at the time, like it was Sunday morning, and she called me up and said, my brother has been killed, and I'd like you to come over here now. So she was crying and everything. And so I get over there, and her brother was like 17. He was hanging out with some dudes who were like 19 or 20. And basically they were in a car, and like some guy in the back was sort of playing with his gun, and he was a legal owner of that gun. And but in there you didn't have to have training. You just could you could buy a gun. You didn't have to have any particular training on it. And he inadvertently shot his friend in the front seat in the kidney. And a couple hours, not long after that, the guy died. And there was, you can imagine, the dude, he didn't have to go to jail. I don't think he went to jail, but I'm just saying it was just one of the accidental things. Obviously it devastated my girlfriend's family, and it was just a tragic thing. This dude, they were one of the best friends. They were pretty close friends. And so it was like, I had to think, well, wow. So on the one hand, it seems like it's true that there are times in which guns can make things safer, but then there's also other times which is the opposite. I don't know if you saw those cases over the weekend. Like there was a couple of cases in the press. Like I think this one yesterday where this 3-year-old killed herself at her own birthday party. Like the 3-year-old killed herself. Like she somehow got a hold of the gun in the house, and and there was another one of those last week too. So So when I think about guns, I have to think about like all of those different kind of cases where on the one hand, there are moments in which they seem to enhance safety, but then there's sometimes a lot of times in which they seem to not enhance safety. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. People are stupid sometimes. You're right.
Have you ever
a
situation in which a gun, the presence of a gun, did not enhance safety?
Did not enhance safety.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've had friends who were not always careful, right?
Uh-huh.
I am always careful, and I know how to handle a gun. But I have definitely hung out around people who were not always careful. People who didn't keep their guns locked up from their kids, or who handled guns when they were intoxicated, like things that
you've seen it.
It's stupid, right? No one in their right mind should do that, and I've seen that happen.
Yeah. So part of I guess what we have to think about is whether or not the people who tend to be anti-gun, whether maybe part of what's going on with them is that they're thinking about, all these kind of cases, like, maybe they're thinking about it. Maybe it's something to think about as you're figuring out how you feel about people. Maybe I haven't heard Joe Biden talk about taking people's guns away, but I have heard him talk about this whole safety question. And we all got to balance like safety versus freedom. But I'm just saying, I just wonder whether or not part of what's going on is people are thinking about both of those. So that's something to think about.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not giving up my guns, David, but I think I can kind of see what you're saying. Like maybe they aren't all out to just usurp my rights. Maybe some people are really concerned. Maybe they just don't get it totally, or yeah.
Okay, and scene. All right. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're close to our time. So I just want to say I really appreciate all those who have listened, and I appreciate Karin for joining me on this journey.
Thank you for having me.
Did you want to say anything as a professional political psychiatrist even? Is there anything you want to say to folks as we are in this final week and one day before the election?
Vote is one thing, and two, it's not too late to get other people to vote, and it's not even too late to persuade people. So a lot of people make up their minds. 20% of people make up their minds in the last 2 weeks before the election. So
even if it's lower this time, it's not zero. Like even if there's less undecided now than usual, that number is not zero, right?
Right. Oh yeah. So you do not stop until the election is done. Keep working.
That's right. And so I would just I agree with that completely. And I want to say that it's so important that we learn how to talk to each other as Americans. As we all know, there are foreign countries and America's enemies who do not want us to talk to each other. And the whole point of this has been we need to learn how to talk to each other about politics and about our elections, but do so in a way that's based on compassion and listening and best practices in persuasion. I think that that's possible. So I would encourage us to keep doing that and lean into that as opposed to lean away from it. Before we close completely, I want to say a couple things. First, for those of you who are concerned about advancing the cause of race relations, especially if you're a white person, I want to tell you about our the Dialogue Company's Race Relations Race Method 101 course. We have a method that is very similar to the REACH method. It's just a different acronym, but it's about racial issues. And it's basically the Race Method 101 course is a self-paced online course, which you can get for $79. Go to thedialoguecompany.com to get a hold of it, and it will enhance your anti-racism work. If you want to have the experience with me as other coaches of getting some live training, we have a new cohort starting in January. It's doing my part as an anti-racism ally. And I'll be joined by a couple of esteemed colleagues, and we'll have 4 sessions right in a row through the month of January, where you will teach you the race method, and we'll give you some exercises to go out and practice, and you'll become a better conversationalist around this issue and a better force for good on racism. And last thing I would say is that, of course, nobody knows the results of the election, but you can bet that there'll be a need for some compassion-based dialogue after the election. So you should watch this space, check back with us, because we will be we will likely offer some 1 or more sessions about how to use these methods of compassionate engagement after the election, because Lord knows we probably gonna need some healing after. No matter who wins, there's gonna be tens of millions of people who are just very disappointed. So we need, and those people are in your family, they're in your neighborhood, they're in your church, and we need to not avoid talking to them about these issues that are so important to us. So check back with us. Come back for the watch party tonight at 8 o'clock. We'll be monitoring the chat. Tell your friends about it. And we want to thank you so much for your participation, and we look forward to checking with you in the future. Vote, 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 vote. All right. See y'all.